The world has gotten safer, and why are we restricting our children in a way that we ourselves weren't restricted?
And that was Danielle Miativ. She and her husband let their 10-year-old and 6-year-old walk home from the park alone, causing the Maryland Child Protective Services to investigate them for child neglect.
The parents said they were practicing free-range parenting to teach their children independence and stand by their parenting decision. But now there is an open investigation against them for at least the next 5 years. So where does the line fall between teaching a child to be independent and parental negligence? We're here now with Lisa LaGrou. She's the founder of the OaklandCountyMoms.com, who she says practices similar parenting techniques.
And next to her is Laura Collette. She's from the Michigan Children's Law Center, who says that she understands why a case like this would be investigated. Let me start with Lisa right now, though. Are you kidding? This day and age, letting a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old walk alone from a park, a school, anything? Don't you want the authorities to investigate?
No, I think if you prepare your children, obviously every child has different maturity levels, and it's the parents' responsibility to assess when their children are ready for certain things in life. These parents prepared their kids for this. They made sure they were ready, and they would never have done it otherwise. 10 and 6 is really not young. I was babysitting for a family that had 4 foster children in the home, and none of them were even related, and I was 10 years old. So there's maturity levels that if you're ready for it, you know, it's a great learning experience.
You know, and Lisa, that we were talking about it just the other day, because Charlie said, I walked to school and I came home for lunch and then walked back to school. I was not like that, but it's a different time, wouldn't you say? I mean, there's more fear out there, and people are different. The crimes seem to be even more, they're different and intense.
I don't see it that way, and I think obviously, Taryn, you're right here in the midst of it all. So I think that location, you know, you definitely practice safety measures. You would never do this in a dangerous neighborhood. You know, if it's considered and deemed safe, then I think that's reasonable.
Let me bring in Laura, though. What about trusting parents? Who better to decide what's better for parents than parents letting their kids go if it's a safe area? Why not?
Well, first of all, Charlie, I want to say how lucky for this Miativ family that they live in such a great neighborhood, and their children don't have to walk past abandoned homes to go to school, and they don't have to take 2 buses across the city to get to school. So they're very lucky to start off with. But I would say, as a child advocate in Wayne County Juvenile Court, I have to remind myself every day that parents have the constitutional right to raise their children as they see fit, as long as there's no imminent risk of harm. And I have to constantly take my judgment out of things and really remember that they have a constitutional right, and that what you're looking at is the risk of harm. And in this case, the protective services workers, if it were in Michigan, they use some structured decision-making tools and try to assess things in a logical way that's sort of valid across counties. But you can't put every case like this into a cookie-cutter assessment tool.
But what do you think? Do you think in Michigan that this would be considered child neglect?
I think it would be totally appropriate for protective service to investigate under these facts, where neighbors called in, made a report, the police were involved, and they called protective services. Protective services has to take the next step and do an investigation.
Why? Well, what do you think about that? Are we using too many government services? I mean, can't the cops kind of assess the situation on the scene?
I do. I think so. I think this got so far in advance, and it's frightened the children. You know, they weren't frightened when they were walking home, but they're surely frightened now. I think that having the cop assess the situation, realize the kids are not afraid, they weren't under any type of, you know, panicked situation, and then let it be. I think parents have the right to raise their children, you know, the way they want to raise them. And if this is what they think is okay for their kids, there's no harm, it's not criminal, there's no harm being done.
And you wrote a blog back in January that it picked up a lot of steam. A lot of people read that, and you were profiled for it. You said that you don't think police and child protective services need to be involved in parenting styles that are designed to promote independence and leadership qualities. Now, some people disagree with that.
Well, I think that getting to that point is just getting too far. I mean, had another parent who saw that, instead of phoning the authorities, maybe from a non-offensive approach, kind of, you know, go up to the kids and say, hey, are you okay? Did you need help? Are you lost? I can call for help. And then realize and assess the situation and realize that they're not in danger at that point. And don't take it further, because what you're doing then is you're interfering with the parent's parenting.
When is a good age to let the kid walk to the park alone? Even if you live on the east side of Detroit, the worst part of the section of Detroit. Laura?
One of the hardest jobs of a parent is to balance safety with independence. In this case, I would not let children of that age walk that far. I was probably more of a helicopter mom if we're going to get into labels.
Which means what?
Well, you keep a little more of a tight rein on your children, but most of my children are now grown and they are resilient adults with successful careers. They're productive members of society. So I rein my children in a little more, and yet on the other side of it, my oldest child has Down syndrome, and so I have spent the better part of 3 decades trying to balance independence and safety for her.
Do you think you're more protective because you have a child with Down syndrome?
I think I would be about as protective as I am in any case.
Right.
But my daughter now lives fairly independently. She lives at home with other girls, with little staffing. She walks to work every day. And I get credit from people for raising my children so independently, or this child so independently. But if anything were to happen, of course.
You're in the courts right now, though. People listening to this right now, watching this right now, are maybe worried that, oh my gosh, if I send my kid off to school and they have to walk a mile past an abandoned house, my God, the protective service is going to come after them. Is that a real worry for people, though?
Well, I don't think in Wayne County, because we have other things to worry about, but...
How about Oakland County? They've got some bad places.
Well, everywhere has
well,
some
yeah,
bad
you can't
places.
say that. I mean, there's some of the safest neighborhoods out there, but you always have maybe one suspected pedophile or stranger danger where there's a report and all of a sudden we're looking for a certain vehicle. I think that, you know, there's a lot of parents that are somewhere in between, and they're still trying to determine what and when is a good decision, a good time to teach your children to be independent.
Well, I think preparing is the best thing that you can do. You know, first maybe you take a walk with your child and you go with them along and see how they handle it, you know. And again, you prepare and you exercise safety precautions, and don't just talk at your kids. Maybe ask them questions. What would you do if this happened?
See, I think it's a danger to keep that cord. You have to cut that cord sometime.
You do.
I think you got to let those kids just fly.
But what about that one bad person, though?
Well,
they're
A federal judge was shot. A federal judge was shot in front of his home, taking out the garbage this week. I mean,
you could be at the local Walmart. Your kids getting
Let these kids grow up.
The aisle over.
Well, it is a fairness something. I think in the late 70s, early 80s, we started to see the missing children on the milk cartons. I mean, it was a different time, and things have changed. I mean, should we be taking more precautions, Laura, though, with our children in this day and age?
Why not? Children are already subjected to all kinds of risks in life, car accidents, other sorts of injuries, disease. Why would we subject them for no reason to walking long distances from home? And in this case, this mother, when she was interviewed, and I don't know what she said to Protective Services, but when I saw an interview with her, she said, and those adults that called about my children, I wish they would have just approached my children and talked to them. To me, that
I think that's
makes
stranger
no sense.
danger for some people.
Well, yes, okay, now she wants her children to walk a mile from home, and she wants strangers to approach them.
When are these kids going to grow up?
But they need these experiences.
All right, let's hold that thought right now. Free-range parenting. How far can parents go before the law comes in and shuts them down? We'll continue in a moment. Free-range parenting, we're talking about whether or not kids should be making decisions on their own, or should the government come in when the parents may not make the best decisions. We're back with LaGrou. She says, yeah, let the parents make the decisions. And Laura Kellett, she says, well, let's hold back a little bit there. Maybe the government should take a look at what the parents do.
But, you know, it is true, though. We are seeing in this day and age more kids, I guess, staying home a little bit longer under their parents' roof, maybe not going out in the world so quickly and depending on them longer and longer. Is that a result of us tightening the reins of our parenting?
I think there's a direct correlation. I think that if we don't give these children the opportunity to learn time management, responsibility skills, decision-making skills, they're never going to get enough practice and get involved in these life skills to grow to that level and reach that point. They're expecting their parents to constantly tell them what to do, where to go, when to do it, how to do it, instead of thinking of these things on their own.
Well, Laura, I mean, you said you work within the courts. I mean, when do you think it's important for the government or CPS to step in? Where's the line?
Well, when there's an imminent risk of harm is what the law says, and they have to determine if there is an imminent risk of harm, and that takes a certain amount of investigation.
So really, does it depend on where you live or what the exact case is?
Well, you have to look at the totality of the circumstances. It's case by case. In this case, perhaps there was a parent with a drug problem asleep at the park and the children wandered off. I mean, you have to do a minimal level of investigation. You can have parents who appear initially very normal, but it turns out they have mental health issues and their children are wandering off.
You're not really opposed to having kids walk to school, walk to the park, that type of thing. And don't kids have cell phones these days anyway if they get in trouble? How old are your kids, or when did you give your kid a cell phone?
Well, my children are 28 down to 15, and they, well, as times have changed, they get their cell phones younger and younger. But one thing I want to sort of say a word in defense of protective services here, because they tend to get bashed when there's an incident like this, and they are human. I work with protective services workers every day. They have a very difficult job, very dangerous, and we need to respect that and appreciate it and try to correct when there is human error. But I would ask that we give them more respect.
We did have some of our viewers sound off on our Fox 2 Facebook page today. We want to bring up a couple of those comments right now. From Jessica Sharisa, she says, I have a 15-year-old and he does it often. I also have a 9, 8, and 5-year-old and won't even let them walk to school. It depends on the age and the maturity. A lot of people feeling that way. Yeah, we also have a comment from Chandra Ioma. Yes, after 8 years old, as long as they knew the route of where they were going, I rode my bike as a child. I will not deprive my children of the same fun and freedom in their lives.
I loved walking to school. We walked with a bunch of kids. We walked through the catwalk. I mean, we had our little thing. We knew there's that's the haunted house. That's a guy. Well, we had fun.
And that builds memories. I mean, my husband had a huge addiction to Slurpees when he was younger.
Me too.
And that's what he did. He rode his bike for Slurpees every day with his friends.
And it really comes down to maybe individual parenting styles, but when it crosses the line when that child might be in danger, I think that's where...
You're not going to let your child go to school.
You know, I guess it depends. I'm a little hypersensitive just because of what's going on in the world. But I'm not, I wouldn't call myself a helicopter parent.
2 blocks from the school.
I rode a bus. I rode a bus.
But the labels are a little ridiculous anyway. I think that every parent is just parenting their child, and you know, I take each individual scenario and assess it at that point. I don't call myself a free-range parent.
We only have a very short time. Laura, wrap up. What should parents seriously know about if they are going to let their child go off just a little bit? What should they know?
Well, again, it comes down, the reason we have a constitutional right to raise our own children is because we know our children best. And our right to liberty recognizes that, and the courts have recognized that. We just have to do it in a rational way that doesn't put them at risk.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, Lisa and Laura, for coming in and sharing your views. Obviously, it's a very hot topic these days, so and the discussion will continue.